All right, welcome back to another episode of the Living the Life Show. I'm your host, Columbus Cody, and I thank you so much for joining me today. I have a very, very, very special guest. I say guests, two tag teaming today. They are going to bring the wisdom, and you're in for a treat. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Holly and Joe. All right, give it up for Holly and Joe.
Hello.
Hello.
You guys get all the applause, all the applause. All right. So, before we get started with the meat of the podcast, I always like to get a chance to know my guests a little closer. So, I always give some rapid fire questions. So, we'll start with Holly, and then Joe, you can jump in and add your answer after hers. Okay. It's popcorn. You never know what's coming. So, it's quick. It's about 4 questions. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right, Holly, what's your favorite dessert?
Anything chocolate.
Anything chocolate. My wife just ate my chocolate cake before she left the house tonight. I
Oh,
was like,
no.
baby, really? Where's my cake? She said, I ate it. I said, okay, revenge. I'm getting you back. All right, what about you, Joe? What's your favorite dessert?
Cannoli.
Really? All right. Now,
Yeah.
your last name, is it
You know what
pronounced
that is, don't you?
Barruso?
Yeah, he's Italian.
Ah, okay. All right. I've never had a cannoli, so one day I'm going to have to try it. I take that back. I think I have had one, but the cream wasn't as sweet as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's kind of it's not a super sweet. It's kind of a mild, sweet, creamy sweet.
Yeah. See, and I'm a sweet guy.
Yeah.
I figure the sweeter the
Gotta
better.
have the chocolate chips in there. That helps.
Okay. I'm going to have to try that next time. All right, Joe, we're going to start with you on this one. What's the best book you've ever read that you recommend other people read? And it can't be the Bible, something other than the Bible.
Oh, darn.
The best book I ever read. Goodness gracious. It'd probably be J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings.
Okay. And that is a very popular one. I've never read it, watched the movies, and I know what you're going to say. The movies don't touch it. So maybe one day I'll go back and read it.
True.
All right,
It's
Holly, what
true.
about you? Best book you've ever read?
Oh, my goodness. That's a hard one. Well, I'm going to go with something I've read recently. And I read a lot of Christian authors and speakers. And so I recently read Lisa TerKeurst's Forgiving the Things You Can't Forget.
Wow.
And it is a really good book. She had a lot of wisdom and experience to share, for sure.
Yeah, forgiveness is a tough one, huh? Yeah, I'm sure we'll probably come out with a few things on that tonight, too.
Yes, we will.
All right. I always love asking this question. What person in the Bible do you feel like you identify with the most? And tell me a little bit why. We'll start with you, Joe, on this one.
I think that would be Jonah. Yeah. Jonah, and why? 3 days in the belly of the whale. I kind of know what that's like.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Holly?
I would say The Woman at the Well. I just am touched by that story every time I read it. I feel like I can identify with where she was in life, and the love and grace that Jesus showed her really touches my heart, for sure.
You know, there's something that's kind of cool. You guys probably didn't catch it, but both of you had whale in your answer. The woman at the well and 3 days in the belly of the whale. All right, final question before we start the good stuff, the deep stuff. What song would you say best represents your marriage right now? If you had to pick one song, what would you say it is? Is that a tough one?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I don't know my Psalms as far as to be able to quote a specific psalm.
No, it doesn't have to be a psalm. What song? Like it could be "Hit the Road, Jack." It could be.
Gotcha.
Okay. It could be "Baby, Baby, Baby" by Justin Bieber. It could be.
Yeah.
I would say Amazing Grace,
Mm,
because we've given each other a lot of grace.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
I'm
What
going
about
with
you?
her answer.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
In all the years of marriage, that's the greatest answer. I'm just going to go with what she said on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little about you guys because I do know that well, I don't say I do know, but I've heard that you have a beautiful testimony between the two of you and I would love to learn a little bit about that. So, just share with us a little bit about who Holly and Joe are and how you've come to know the Lord and how your lives have changed because of Jesus.
Absolutely. Um, well, how long do you have? Because we could
You
talk a
just
while,
you
but
just talk until you don't want to talk no more.
okay. Um, well, we have been married 25 years, over 25 years now, and together for about 30 years.
Beautiful.
And we have 4 kids between us and 2 grandkids. And so we've been through a lot of life together for
Mhm.
sure. Um, and we both had some struggles when we were youngsters,
Mhm.
and went through some kind of rebellious kind of phases in our life. Me for sure. Um, and didn't know, well, I didn't know the Lord at all when I was young. Joe grew up in the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
and so he was kind of turned off, away from the Lord, as a result of his upbringing. Um, and we struggled individually when we were young adults as well, but we got together. Let's see, I was 23 when we met. Joe is 7.5 years older, so he was a little bit older. Um, and we had a lot of things that we each brought into our marriage that
Mhm.
that caused, some tension and conflict between us, and heavy issues that most early marriages don't necessarily have to deal with. And so we struggled a lot in our marriage for the first 12 years. Um, and we actually, our current pastor now, when we first met him and started talking with him, which was, gosh, that was 15 years ago now, he would say, well, you all have been through every hardship, every hard issue that I see marriages could face. Um, And so usually when couples come to me, they've gone through one or two really hard things. You guys have gone through a lot.
Mm.
So he could totally understand why our marriage was struggling. And
Well, it was more than struggling.
yeah,
By the time we hit the 12-year mark, Holly was ready to divorce me.
Mhm.
Um, that's the place we had come to, and I would say that was in large part on me, my failures as a husband and as a man. Um, so her wanting to end the marriage at that point, although I understood her feelings, I wasn't in agreement that that was the best way to address the problem. And I realized the problem was me. So it was me who needed to do the changing. And I credit all of that to the Lord.
Mm.
I was not, you know, I was sort of a, uh, what you would call uh, what would you call me as far as a Christian at that point? We went to church, but I was not.
You're like a babe in Christ.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, even that, I was just sort of just doing it, not really. My
Just
heart wasn't in it.
going through the motions.
Yeah, just going. Thank you. Going through
Mm.
the motions. That's where I was at that point. But then, when faced with this crisis and wanting to save the marriage and save
Mm.
my family, really the only one really that had the answers for me at that time was the Lord.
Mm,
I just didn't realize what was happening. I could look back later and say, oh my gosh, you know, that was the Lord
yeah,
in my life, moving in my life and bringing me to a place of total change,
yeah. Now,
turning me inside out.
uh-huh. I heard you say that you grew up, well, Holly said actually you grew up in the Catholic Church. Do you
Yeah,
think that is one of the pulling forces of you not wanting divorce? Because I know in the Catholic Church, divorce is like really frowned upon, and
yeah,
maybe subconsciously in the back of your mind, you felt like this is not what we do. And even though you weren't committed to serving God through the Catholic Church, that was like kind of kind of sprinkled into your heart just by
possibly. Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible. I
Mhm.
mean, uh, I was struck with as a child in attending Catholic church. The one thing that stuck out for me was the mystery around all of it.
Mm,
The Catholics, of course, have the beautiful cathedrals and the robes and all of it. And I was an altar boy, so I was completely awestruck by all of it. I didn't quite understand it fully, but cut to later in life and my marriage falling apart, and then it started to make real sense to me, and I realized the only hope for any real change would be for me to embrace the Lord's teachings with regard to love specifically.
mm,
That if I didn't learn how to love better, not only better, but authentically and truly for the first time,
yeah,
there was no hope. And, thank the Lord, I did learn. It took a
yeah.
while. And that's why I talked about 3 days in the belly of the whale. That period of time, we were estranged for 2 years.
Mhm.
From the time Holly left the house and filed for divorce and was living elsewhere, and we were shuttling kids back and forth, um, it would be 2 years
Mm,
before she would believe that the change was real and that we could possibly go forward together.
yeah.
And she did. She returned to the marriage and dropped the divorce, and we've been together ever since. And that was 11 years,
12 years
12
ago.
years ago now.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, do
Yeah.
you feel like, after that experience, like your bond took on like a whole nother level of closeness?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely.
It's amazing what adversity does for some of us, and it
Yes.
crushes some and it builds others.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I
how did
mean,
you guys get into counseling then?
well, I actually became a counselor really before we even got married. Because I had been through my own hard times in my adolescence and my very young adulthood, like I actually was in my own personal therapy and I loved my therapist and
Mm,
so greatly appreciated, how she guided me and the wisdom she spoke into me. And I thought, wow, she's really helped me. I really love that. I want to be able to help others the way she's helped me. And so I went to graduate school for marriage and family therapy, and I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and then did a lot of years of internship and gaining hours of experience, and then got licensed as a marriage and family therapist. That was in the state of California. We were living out there at the time. Um, and so then I started working in that career from then, and then kind of on and off during the time that we had young kids. And then when we settled here in Tennessee, it took me a little while, but finally I got my license here in Tennessee. I worked for a lot of other agencies for a while until I got my license, and then I started a private practice 5 years ago, and almost exactly 5 years ago in February, late February, and so now I have a private practice. It's called Saving Grace Counseling, and Joe has partnered with me, and we have 2 employees and about to take on a third. And we are very passionate about helping other couples. Joe and I really like to work with marriages and helping people save their marriage. We have a lot of hopes and dreams for what we want to do with that, and offer more workshops and intensive sessions with couples, and while simultaneously helping a lot of other populations as well, children, teenagers, adults. So we're really kind of covering the gamut and trying to offer a lot of help and support for those who are hurting.
Yeah. I saw it when I was gleaning through or perusing through your website, and I said, man, you guys cover a lot of ground, because I was thinking maybe you were just specializing in relationships and marriage. And I saw all the things from eating disorders and I mean, just a well-rounded, like you said, I mean, like what true ministry is, ministry is meeting
Right.
the entire need. And I mean, when I read that the short little snippet, I was like, okay, I'm excited. I'm getting even more excited now. I can't wait to learn a
No.
little bit, to sit at the feet and learn a little bit. What about you, Joe? How did you end up getting into counseling?
Well, it was really the result of the testimony. It was here I had this testimony of change,
Mm-hmm.
and the our marriage being saved, and I just felt like there was real value in that, and I wanted to figure out how to share that testimony and affect as many other couples in trouble or in crisis with that testimony as possible, to provide hope, that it can change.
Yeah.
Even when it appears all hope is lost,
Mm-hmm.
on the verge of divorce or whatever. So I went and I got certified as a relationship coach. So I work primarily with couples that are struggling and in crisis, and work to help them turn that around.
Cool. Let me ask you this. This question just popped in my spirit, so I forgot to throw it out to you. Have you ever learned a strategy, or you come across something that was just really cool and you were like, I'm gonna test it on my husband, I'm gonna test it on my wife? Have y'all done that? To like know if this strategy is one that I would give to my client? Because this one actually works, because I used it on Joe. I used that one on Holly.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say on, but
Use
with.
only proven method. Everything we do is only proven. It's all proven.
Yeah,
Okay.
The fact that we're still married
yeah.
is proof that it's proven.
The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, it
Right,
really is.
right. Yeah, I
It
Awesome.
mean,
really is.
yes, I mean, I've learned various different, therapeutic techniques and theories and all of that. But it's really kind of the opposite now, as well, especially when I work with couples, and when we work with couples together, we take our personal experience and what God has shown us and what we learned in our own personal lives,
Mm,
to then speak to clients. And so really our testimony, has become our therapeutic intervention,
yeah. Yeah. And they see the relevance then, right? They see that this is real. This is not something they read out of a book trying to throw at
Yeah,
us. This is something that's, that pertains to my life just like it pertains to their lives.
right. Because we did that therapy, leading up to the 12-year mark in crisis. We had been in therapy all that time, couples therapists, individual therapy, all of it, and nothing changed.
Mm,
Nothing changed. So then when this, coming out the other side of the crisis, and it really impacted us, and truly, like Holly says, that is now what we apply to our therapeutic approach, is the experience
yeah.
and the testimony. And we freely, with our clients, we freely share our testimonies. That's not something you'll encounter with most therapists or
Hmm.
counselors. They're not going to open up about their personal experiences, but it's our hope by doing that they better appreciate our message, that it's
Yeah.
coming from a place of real experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny you say that, because I've always been the believer that if you've never endured what you're trying to tell me I can overcome,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm willing to listen because I do want to
Yeah.
overcome what I'm dealing with. But when you
Right.
tell me that God brought you out of this,
Yeah.
and I'm double interested in what you have to say. I think about like people who try to tell people don't drink, don't smoke,
Hmm.
that have never drank, never smoked. You've never tried drugs, but you're telling them about how God can rescue them. They want to hear that, yeah. But when you tell them that you hit rock bottom and God pulled you out of the gutter,
Hmm.
and now you are standing on solid ground helping many people overcome what you overcome, their radar, their antennas shoot sky high and they want to hear everything you have to say now.
Yes.
And then hopefully we don't squander our ability to be a great witness in that situation by living contrary to what God tells us to do. Now that we have that audience with them and we
Right.
have this connection, I don't want to throw this opportunity away. I want to make sure when you leave my presence, you felt like you and God had a conversation. And
Right. Right.
something else I saw on your website that blessed me, you said that and I'm paraphrasing it, it was something to the effect of that it is faith based but you do not force your faith upon anyone.
Mhm.
But and if your clients would like to pray, excuse me, would like to pray, you will pray with them, but that's not necessary. And I thought it's so beautiful because we can't help but influence a person by what we're influenced by. But we don't have to beat you in the head with a Bible. But at the
Yes.
end of the day, what you're going to hear from me is what God has done in my heart. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, yeah, definitely, when I read that, I was like, man, that was beautifully stated because I'm just letting you know if you are a believer, you're getting ready to get everything that God gave me. And if you're not a believer, you still can benefit from what God has poured in me. I won't bring up God. How about that?
Right. Yes.
But
Yep.
God is still doing a work in you. All right.
Absolutely.
Are y'all ready to go a little deeper?
Oh.
Sure.
All right. All right. So I want to say about 7 questions that I'd love for you guys to just enlighten me on and help me understand as it relates to building a godly marriage. Some of the things that maybe some of us don't gravitate to or don't understand, or things that are blocking us from having this blessed union that God wants us to have. All right. So here's my first question for you. In
Wow,
your
I'm so impressed with
experience,
the on-screen graphics.
say
This is,
again.
I said I'm so impressed with the on-screen graphics. And I'm a graphic designer at heart, so I'm really appreciating.
Well,
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy.
maybe one day you can teach me a few things. Yeah, yeah. But I try to make sure I take care of my first class customers here. Y'all are first class. So, but in your experience, what are some things that you've seen men and women need to have in place before getting married to make sure their relationship, has the best chance for success?
That's a very good question.
You could take that one.
Well, coming from a therapeutic lens, I think it's really important for young adults to kind of understand their upbringing and understand their family dynamics and understand what was role modeled to them, and
Mm,
whether they had a healthy model of what a healthy marriage looks like, or whether it was a dysfunctional model.
mm-hmm.
Because if it was a dysfunctional model, then they're going to have to learn more about, well, what's a healthy marriage? What even is that? Because if we didn't have that modeled for us when we were young, we don't understand what it is, and so then we end up repeating the same dynamics that were modeled for us,
Yeah.
when we were young. So when people come to us for premarital counseling, I just really want to kind of work on, tell me your story and tell me about your childhood, and then you tell me yours, and then I kind of help them see, like, together, do you see, like, this particular thing might be an issue, that so I help them see how each of their own individual issues might play out in a marriage
Mm,
and could cause problems.
yeah. Wow.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, because we don't think about those things sometimes. Even just how we're gonna raise our children. You know,
Right.
you believe in spanking, I don't believe in spanking. That becomes an issue. You know,
Yeah.
now, I mean, we might go get divorced because I don't want you to spank my child. And I'm like, no, he needs a spanking. You know, so we grew up
Uh-huh.
in different households like that. And yeah,
Right.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Just, I mean, and unfortunately, many of us don't have a model. And
Yeah.
so we have to learn it from somewhere. And God forbid we learn it from TV and movies and music. But we
Right.
Exactly.
subconsciously do get influenced
Exactly.
by those things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, you make a very important point. And I think, people entering into the prospect of marriage, you've got to know the truth between what is the world's version of love and what is God's love as defined in the Bible. Two
Mm,
entirely different things.
yes.
And so many of us and of married couples, inevitably the marriage is going to run aground because you're practicing a form of love that's not God's love.
Mm,
And that worldly version of love is will wreck a marriage.
Mhm.
There's so much um, dependency and expectancy of each other in that type of in that version, what I'll call that version of love. It's
hmm.
not God's version as defined in the Bible.
Yeah.
And I
Very
find that's the
conditional,
big,
huh?
Yes, very conditional.
very,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very conditional.
Yeah.
I
And
find
it's
that's the
funny.
biggest lacking.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
That is the biggest lacking for um, couples who reach crisis, but not just couples that reach crisis, but young people entering into marriage. You need to know what it really is,
Yeah.
not the fantasy version that, like you said, we're fed by TV
Right.
or the songs on the radio or whatever it
Right.
might be.
You know, I've always found it weird that people could go into marriage with the idea that if it doesn't work, I've got options. It's like
Mm,
if you're going
Yeah.
into it with that thought process, it's not going to work,
yeah,
you know. Um,
yeah,
and I was telling my wife, I honestly believe like getting married, you start, like you said, you learn love from a different perspective. You learn it from, especially if you're both believers. Now you learn God's love because it's a challenge being married, right? But I think having
Mhm.
children amplifies the love like by 100%. Like you love your wife,
Yeah.
you love your husband, but that baby, it's like your love, like the meter just lifts a little bit more. Like, wow, I didn't know I was capable of that kind of love, you know, and just learning how to, I think you said it perfectly, learning how to love. That's a good way to look at it. I just want to learn how to love. I want to learn how to love how God loves. And I think God uses our relationships to expose to us his deep
mm,
love because I guarantee we frustrate him like our spouse frustrates us, you know?
for
Yeah.
sure,
Yes, for sure.
for sure. Yeah,
All right.
one.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to make the point that to sort of button that is one uh, very smart psychologist. He described marriage as a people growing machine,
Mm,
and that makes perfect sense. If you think God designed it and it's for God's purpose, it's ultimately to grow us by way
yeah.
of relationship.
Mm. It's funny you said that because I had a growing question somewhere around here.
Oh,
I'm going to
Okay.
skip to it then. In what ways do you think marriage impacts our spiritual growth?
Well, yeah, I think, like Joe was saying, I mean, ideally, um, we will be, growing spiritually while we're learning how to love our spouse. And if we are seeking God in that, um, then He will teach us, how to love.
Mm,
Um, but sometimes, you know, we aren't able to carry out all those principles of God's love. And we don't have the kind of marriage, that God would design for us. And I have definitely seen a lot of people who kind of turn away from God because of that, because they think God's not answering their prayers
mm,
to heal their marriage. But meanwhile, they're not doing all the things that God would want them to do to be able to love their spouse better and have a healthier marriage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've definitely seen people turn away from the Lord, kind of blaming him,
Mm.
that he didn't intervene or he didn't save the marriage when, there was so many things they needed to do to be obedient to God and do what God was calling them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I always think about this concept of patience, how we want God to always be patient with us, but we're never patient with others. It's
Yeah.
like it doesn't work that way. And you mentioned about forgiveness in the book that you mentioned earlier about forgiveness. And the Bible tells us clearly that if we don't forgive others, God won't forgive us, right? And the same thing happens with patience. We want him to be patient with. We even praise God for his patience. And in the second breath, we withhold patience from, you know, those that we love or those that we are in relationship with. And my
Right.
pastor said something years ago, and I'm going to throw it out to you and you tell me what you think of this statement. He says, our capacity to hate is is only as strong as our capacity to love. And what he means by that is it's hard to hate someone, truly hate, that you don't have a love for, like the burning in you to really be so angry and filled with hate is connected to your ability to actually love that person, like how deep that love is. uh
Right. Yep.
I'm
Yeah, I do think
it
there's
was
truth in that. I mean, you know, God calls us to love our enemies, so we always talk about that in terms of, and sometimes our spouse is our enemy, so, but if God's calling us to love our enemies, what do you think
Mhm.
he's calling us to do with our spouse?
Right, right.
I mean,
Yeah. I had a professor that told me once I was struggling, in my previous marriage, and I was like, I said, Coach, I can't deal with it, and he said, would you respond to your next door neighbor the same way you responded to her if they did the same thing? And I said,
Yeah.
no. He said, well, treat her like your neighbor. And I was like,
uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
so simple but so profound. Why? But because I'm closer to you, the pain of
Yeah.
what you
Yes.
did hurts me different than the guy next door. And so that's
Yeah.
Yes.
what, when my pastor said that statement, that's what he means. Your capacity, it only hurts you, and it builds that fire within you because you actually love this person so deeply. How could they hurt
Mhm.
me like that? How could they say those things to me? And because of that, and as you stated earlier, the growth, you know, this is like the perfect training ground to grow. A relationship is like the perfect training ground to grow in our spiritual lives because there's so much we're going to gain from this. If we, you know, don't resist, if we don't put up the barriers between what God wants to do with us. Um,
Right.
I
Right.
j- I just can't imagine blaming God for my choice. You know, because I chose my spouse. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
God didn't
Right.
say you have to marry her. I
Right.
chose her, right?
True.
Now he did put guidelines in the word, like you said earlier, don't be unequally yoked and all these different things to help you pick a spouse that would be a blessing to you. And you may have overlooked those because she was just so cute or he was so handsome. And now
Right.
20 years later, she ain't that cute no more and he ain't that handsome. Now we got the dad bods, and so now I don't want to listen to nothing you got to say.
Yeah.
You were
Right.
fine when you had a six pack, but with that
But
dad bod,
Jesus put that all in perspective when he said, "What credit is it to you to love those who love you back?" That's what we're dealing with here. Stop and think about that. And
mm,
I gotta be frank. I never hear that verse in church.
Yeah.
That is one of the hardest.
mm,
Take a good close look at it and read that. It changes our entire concept of what we think marriage is.
yeah,
That I'm supposed to find my soulmate who's gonna who's gonna love me just right and in the perfect way. Well, Jesus wasn't saying that at all. He was saying, no, God's love is demonstrated when you love someone who isn't loving you back.
right. They're not very
That's love.
lovely. They're not very lovely at all. Can you love them in spite of? because
Right.
what you're doing, sinners can do. I'm giving you power
Exactly.
to overcome stuff that the world has to acknowledge I'm in your life. And yet you're doing the same thing that the sinner would do, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
think I'm gonna put it up there, but I think we kind of was talking about this earlier. But what's the best way to build a godly marriage?
Yes. Well, I always say, I there are three really big ingredients necessary to have a godly marriage, and the first is humility, having the willingness to look at yourself
Hmm.
and self reflect, and have humility to see that you are not perfect, and that no matter what your spouse is doing, you're contributing to the problem as well. And so rather than blaming your spouse, have the humility to take responsibility and ownership, for your behavior, because that's all you can change is your own behavior. You cannot
Mm.
change your spouse. And so we have to have that humility. Rather than pointing fingers. And then second is forgiveness. Forgiveness is so important in a marriage. And there are so many things just on a day to day basis that we could hold a grudge about and be really resentful about. And what happens is those things, just build and build and build
Hmm.
and build until you have this mountain of unforgiveness in your heart and this, resentment and bitterness towards your spouse. And so God told us, don't let the sun go down on your anger,
Yeah.
and that we need to forgive others because God has forgiven us.
Hmm.
And so, but so many times we don't apply that, in our marriage because it's hard to forgive. It can be hard. And
How many
then,
times? How many times do I have to forgive her?
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
70 times
Seven,
7.
70. No, Jesus.
Yes, that's a lot.
490 times.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Indefinitely. You forgive
yes,
her as often as
definitely.
I forgive you. Oh,
Yep,
wow. I love
yep,
it. I love it.
yeah.
All right, feed me number three. I got two. I'm ready for the
Okay,
third one.
number 3 is selflessness.
Mm.
So there's a lot of selfishness in our world today, and we human beings in our own flesh can be very selfish. And so most people approach marriage like, how are you going to meet my needs? And you're not meeting my needs
Mm.
adequately. And so I'm not going to meet your needs. Well, if you're not doing that for me, I'm not going to do that for you.
Wow.
But if you go into it with a very selfless attitude of trying to meet your spouse's needs and
Hmm.
give love the way God calls you to, irregardless of what you're getting back from your spouse, inevitably there is going to be, this exchange of love and giving. But if you get selfish about it, then you're each going to hunker down in your selfishness.
Mm.
And, you're not going to want to love the way God calls you to because you don't feel like you're being loved, the way you want to be. So selflessness is really important.
Recipe for disaster right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I'm so fortunate and so blessed to have a wonderful pastor. I'll share something with you. He said as well. To me, he's like the relationship guru, even though he doesn't talk. Like whenever it seems like every message comes back to relationship some kind of way. But he said
Yeah.
a relationship is like a bank account.
Yeah.
There's only two things you can do. You can withdraw, you can deposit. And if you continue to withdraw, and you never make deposits, what's going to happen to your account? You go broke, you go
Right.
bankrupt. The same thing happens in a relationship. If she's a giver and you're a taker, all she does is give and give, and you take, and you never put nothing back, she's going to go broke, or vice versa. If that's what I am as a husband, I'm always pouring in, but my wife is just taking. Eventually I'm going to run out of funds. I'm going to be insufficient. And but if we're both looking to pour into this and pour
Right.
into this and pour into this, down the road, we look up and we have a rich marriage. Our marriage is overflowing. We have an abundance because all we've done is look to pour into each other. And I'm very, very fortunate to have a wife who's very selfless, and very, very, very forgiving. And, well, let me see. Is she humble? Let me see if she's going to watch this. I'm gonna say she's humble too. So yeah, I hit the jackpot. Oh my
Yay.
goodness. I'm
Good
gonna go on and marry her again. I'm gonna go on. As soon as I get off this call with y'all, I'm gonna call her and say, baby, let me marry you one more time.
No.
So my mother-in-law, and this is weird. My mother-in-law had a stroke about, let me see, my oldest son is 13. So about 12 years ago. And it totally changed our lives. Like 2 to 3 nights a week, my wife doesn't spend the night at our home. She sleeps in my mother-in-law's house. So they rotate who gives her care in the evening. So like tonight, she's at my mother-in-law's. That's why I picked tonight. So I wouldn't interrupt her TV time or nothing like that doing the interview. And just that small bit of separation from each other, that one day apart, that one night apart, I should say, it just makes you long and love the connect when you're together. It's like, oh my God, I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I can't wait to see you in the morning, And I honestly believe, which I'm not grateful that my mother-in-law had a stroke, but I honestly believe so much good came out of that. And I don't know, my wife thinks I still would be a great husband, a great father if that didn't happen. But I think it forced me to step my game up in a different way. Like my boys and me are closer probably because 2 to 3 nights a week, I have to do everything for them versus mom doing all the mom duties that dads sometimes kind of step back and let her do, and so I'm grateful for that. And so, I just thinking about what you said, humility, forgiveness, and selflessness. Those are 3 things that I strive to be as well. Selflessness is the one I got to work the hardest
Yep,
on.
that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She ate my chocolate cake. I'm going to get her back. No, I actually bought it for her, but I gave her the blues for eating it without coming to ask for it first. What if that was for me, sweetie? Years ago, it was so funny. I haven't let her live it down yet. I bought these caramel apples from a lady at my job, and they were supposed to be like the best caramel apples. And I bought my wife one, I bought me one. So my wife ate hers and she enjoyed it. So I came home the next day to eat mine and it was gone. She ate it. And I'm like, baby, where's my, she said, oh, you wanted that one? I was like, yeah. So now I've never experienced that candy apple because that lady that made them doesn't do it anymore. So I always tease her, periodically about how I don't have a candy apple because of her. So, All right, now this is probably going to be my favorite question of the night. Y'all ready for this one?
Sure.
All right,
Sure.
I can't wait to hear how you answer this one. If you could surgically implant one character trait within men and women to help them have great relationships, what would it be? Now, and it could be different for men and women, but you can only surgically implant one character trait.
Oh my goodness. That's a tough one.
And it may be one of the 3 you just mentioned. So
Yeah,
because those are 3 good ones.
I think humility all the way around would work.
Yeah, because humility is going to bring about the other 2, isn't it?
Very true. That's why I list it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I think humility is probably the most important because our pride really gets in the way.
It does.
Of, being able to love and forgive others, So if we, can be humble, we will be better able to love the way God calls us to.
So pride interferes with progress.
Yes.
Now, this next question, that was an easy one. I was thinking I was going to stump you a bit. You guys are good at this. This next question that I had put on my screen, I thought about myself. I've been an educator for 21 years, and I've taught elementary, high school, and now middle school. And my high school students, I have a close bond with a lot of them, even to this day. They've befriended me on Facebook now that, they're adults. Some of them are like 30 years old now. And they're like, the stuff you taught me in class, I still live by it. And, which really, truly does bless my heart.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? As much advice as I give, I think I'm gonna be a life coach, right?
Uh-huh.
But then I started thinking, ah, I don't want to listen to everybody's problems because and the reason I say that, I don't process things well when I can't fix something. All right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
here's your question that's dealing with that. How do you maintain a balance of having compassion for your clients without internalizing their pain and problems and weighing you down?
Mm, smart.
That's a good question. Um, well,
Humility.
yeah.
Humility wins
I know
again.
better. I,
Right.
I always make a point of letting the clients know, hey, I'm not. I am not a judge.
Mm,
I'm not one to be judging anybody. I can tell you, if I haven't done worse things, then I'd be lying to you if I said
mm,
otherwise.
yeah,
Compassion comes from humility.
yeah.
Is once you realize you're no better. Who are you to be standing in judgment of anyone or
Mm-hmm.
making yourself in some way superior? Um, none of us are worthy of that, and we should all have compassion for each other in our suffering.
Mm,
Yeah, I always try to tell clients like this is a non-judgmental zone, and please don't think I'm sitting here with everything all figured out and not having any of my own problems or been through my own problems and pain.
mm,
And so I have no right to judge you, and this is a space of, support, empathy, compassion. Um, because oftentimes what clients talk about are things I've struggled with.
mm-hmm.
So that helps me to like tune into them and really feel their pain.
Yeah, yeah. Do you when you're with a client, do you have the, like in the movies when they're writing stuff down as you're talking,
Mhm.
and they're like, "What are you writing on that notebook?
Yeah,
Stop writing
you
that.
know,
What are you're writing a lot over
It's a grocery list.
there."
right?
Right. My client is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like, and I like, and the reason I asked you this question is because, like I said, for me, sometimes it weighs so heavy on you because you hate that another person is hurting so much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just wish I could take it away from you. You know, I
Yes.
don't like going to funerals because people are crying and they're hurting. I'll be honest with you, I don't even like going to weddings. I don't know why. I think that's just a time consuming thing. Like, I just want to wish you, yeah, good job, and give you a gift and get out of there. And maybe it's because I'm a homebody. I don't know. But especially funerals, I feel so inadequate
Mm,
because I know when I see you cry, I know how much you're hurting and I want to take it away so bad. And
Mm,
so the reason I wanted to pose this question to you, because I mean, who knows? You guys help me understand this. Maybe I could be a good life coach if I figured out, you don't have to fix their problem. You just got to listen to
well,
them.
yes, that's the other thing I was going to say is that um, as my relationship with the Lord grew and my faith grew and my dependency on Him grew, I learned, um, I'm not the healer.
Mm,
I'm not the one that can heal their hearts and change their life circumstances. God is the one who can do that. And
mm-hmm,
so it's not my burden to carry. And so when I drive home, if there has been a particularly hard situation or, just my clients' hurts are weighing on me, I make sure I pray and give it back over to God and put it down at His feet and
yeah,
trust in Him because I am not that good that I can fix all that for them,
right.
but I know that God can. So
Yeah.
I try to really unload that burden. And every morning I pray the same way before I even get out of bed. Like, Lord, I'm dependent on you today, and you're the healer. You're the one that can help my clients, so just give me your words, give me words of wisdom, fill me with your truth so that I can share that with them.
Mm, that's
Um,
beautiful. That does take the pressure off you, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
like that. I mean, because I'm not here to save anybody. I'm here to point you to the Savior, not to
Yes.
save you.
Exactly.
Uh-oh. Time to get certified.
Ah.
I'm gonna go help some people. I'm gonna go help some people. All right. Here's another good one. What is a common trait you see in relationships that struggle, and also a trait that you see in relationships that flourish? So if people say, I see this a lot in struggling relationships, and I see this a lot in relationships that flourish. And this might give the listeners or the viewers a chance to go, you know what? I need to put that in my life, or I need to figure out a way to get that out of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness.
Yeah,
Lack thereof, or an abundance of.
Forgiveness. Yeah.
Is that the answer to both?
Yeah.
Well, in different ways. So,
Right.
yeah.
Where there's a lack of forgiveness, they struggle. Where there's abundance of relationship, they flourish. Where there's an abundance of forgiveness, they flourish.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? What do you think makes it so hard for us to forgive? Why do you think that is so difficult?
Pride.
You guys are
Yeah.
y'all are
Pride
in
and
tune over there.
selfishness. Pride and selfishness. You know,
Mm.
we don't. A lot of people think, that the person has not apologized appropriately, or they're not truly remorseful, or they don't deserve forgiveness, so they make it contingent on other people, or we think we were right and the other person was wrong, and so I'm not the one that needs to give forgiveness. They were wrong. They need to admit they were wrong, type of thing. So it's this battle of pride.
Yeah.
Who's right, who's wrong?
It's retaining power over that. They're unwilling to surrender that power.
Yeah. So if I surrender my power, though, what does that make me?
Makes you an obedient servant to the Lord, which is the best of all, isn't it?
You passed the test. Great teacher. I was like, he's not gonna say powerless. No, you are now you're following the all powerful at that time.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Now you get a chance to see God move in a way that it was blocked before, because you continue. I should say I, not you. I continue to stand in the way. I continue to block this blessing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's surrender, surrendering to the Lord, and letting him be in control.
Every knee will bow.
So simple. Unforgiveness is causing my relationship to struggle, and my ability to forgive is causing my relationship to flourish.
Correct.
Wow. It don't get no more simple than that, guys. Y'all, are you listening to this?
Simple and so hard. It's just so hard.
And I've said this before, forgiveness isn't always easy, but it's always possible. Right?
Yes,
I mean, what God has told us to do isn't always an easy thing, but it's always made possible to do. We lean and depend on his strength. And then it goes back to what we said at the beginning of today, is that marriage is like perfect training ground for our spiritual lives. How can I withhold forgiveness with my wife, and I can focus on how God overlooked my faults and saw my needs? That just thinking that alone is going to now make me have to look at myself in the mirror, look at myself, matching myself up against the word and saying, I can't live like this. God has forgiven me for far worse than what I'm trying to withhold forgiveness from my wife. So I need to get rid of this pride and forgive her.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. All right. I think I got a couple more here for you, and then we'll let you guys go on and enjoy your evening.
Okay.
Why do you think people avoid or resist seeking marital counseling?
Good question.
It's that P word again, isn't it?
I was gonna say that. I thought, I'll keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's pride. Yeah. They don't want to admit how bad they're struggling. Yeah.
Well, what keeps us from submission? I mean, what keeps us from ultimate submission is pride as a protector,
Mm.
as self preservation. When we turn our preservation over to the Lord, we no longer need self. As Jesus said, if we're to follow him, we're going to have to deny self.
Mm.
So self is the problem, always getting in the way.
Mm. Mm. Man, the pesky pride.
Yeah,
Pesky
so
pride is right.
if you go see a counselor, you may have to take a look at yourself.
Yeah.
Mm.
Who wants to
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah. But I can't
Yeah.
get any better unless I'm willing to look at myself.
Right. Absolutely. What happens though is usually people come into marital counseling thinking that it's their spouse that is the one to blame, and they want the therapist to fix the
Fix them.
spouse,
Mm.
and they don't see that they've got issues in their own heart that they need to fix too. It's never a one way street.
So I can
Never.
see the speck in your eye and I can't see the beam in mine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
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 Man, you guys are transforming me into a better husband. My wife's going to owe y'all some money after this. All right, now this one is near and dear to me as a man, so maybe you guys can help me understand this. What advice would you give to men to help us to be more open and vulnerable with our wives or partners? Because I think we as men, I know it's pride too, but I
Yeah.
think it's hard for us to just let go and feel ooey gooey. You know what I'm saying? Like women are a little bit more compassionate and lovey dovey, but for us, it just feels weird or doesn't feel masculine. How do we get past that and become more open and vulnerable?
Mhm. Well, you're right. It is pride. Hate to keep going back to that, but
It's a self-protective thing.
yeah.
So how do I overcome that? How do I push through that?
Well,
faith.
Yeah, it's really, the first step is recognizing the pride, and recognizing that you've got this wall of protection around you. And really the wall of protection is usually about past hurt, whether it's past hurt in your marriage or it's, past hurt from childhood. You've been hurt and wounded.
Mm.
And so you've got this kind of defensiveness, this wall up, to protect yourself. And you don't want to admit that you're hurting, and you don't want to admit that, you're struggling or that you have been through hard things. And so, because like you said, people think that's not masculine.
Mm.
So do the opposite. So the way you overcome it is in faith, take action, love is in action, and push through the fear, because it's fear rooted in your past that's causing you to behave in this way. Push through it and do the opposite of what you're inclined to do, which is, I'm going to go isolate. I'm going to go out to the garage and build something. I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to go to the bar. Whatever it is, push through it and do the exact opposite. Go to your wife and say, honey, would you like to go to dinner and spend time together? Would you like to sit and watch your favorite show? Whatever it is, push through your fear. We overcome fear with faith. And it's obedience to those commands to love that we ultimately push through our fear.
I love that. I love that. Push through it. Push through it with faith. Let my faith overcome my fear. Push through it. Now, it's just so funny how God made us different, men and women. Women are just, it's so easy. Well, I won't even say that. I can't say that.
No, there's definitely women that don't want to be vulnerable either.
Yeah.
We actually come across plenty of women that have their wall of protection up, for sure.
Yeah. See, I almost made a stereotypical mistake. Not all women. It's easy for them. It's difficult for them too. It's just most of the time you'll see women they want that engagement. They want that conversation. Right. And men, we're afraid to open up because what if it's not received the right way? Or, I think the last thing you want to do in your relationship is walk on eggshells, but at the same time, you don't want to be callous and rude and it's kind of like almost, well, the truth, hey, if it hurts, it hurts, but it's the truth. But yeah, but did you speak that truth in a way that we can grow from it? You know what I mean? It's, yeah,
in
you
love.
said truth, but you said it in a way that was very hurtful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jesus called us to speak truth in love.
Mm,
He spoke truth, but with lots of love and
Within
grace.
the context of love,
right.
commitment, and mercy.
Yeah. Even those Pharisees that weren't
Yeah,
worth a quarter, he still died for them too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ah. Mm.
Mhm.
Now, every time I finish a podcast, I always like to finish with the same exact question because the title of the podcast is the Living the Life Show. We're always striving to live a life that honors God, that pleases God. So I always like to ask this question. Oh, let me take
Oh,
that one down.
Mm.
Who is the one person in your life that lived like Jesus before you that encouraged you to surrender your heart to the Lord? I always like to give them their flowers, to acknowledge them, because believe it or not, it should be all of our aspirations that our name will be mentioned in this segment one day. Someone asks, "How did you come to know God?" or "How did you come to love God like you do?" And they say, "Well, Holly did. Holly, she lived like that before me. Joe, if it wasn't for Joe, I just don't think I would have saw Jesus the same way." So, who is that one person for you guys?
Can I have two people?
Everybody wants two.
you can have mine.
I'll give you two.
Mine was a two-step process. I have a very dear friend. Her name is Kendra. And she's the one who taught me about the Lord and led me to the Lord.
Mm,
And she absolutely modeled what that looked like, and showed me a lot of love and grace and compassion when I was really hurting and not living my life the way God would have wanted me to.
mm,
Um, and then, as soon as I was able to start taking steps in that direction and surrender my life to the Lord and allow Him in, is when my heart started softening towards Joe. Before I was able to do that, I was just so angry and hurt from all those years,
mm-hmm,
um, that I wasn't willing to see what he was doing. But then, slowly over time, my eyes were open to the fact that he had come to know the Lord, and he had been humbled,
mm,
and that he really was changing, and so that touched my heart even more,
yeah,
um, to see how he did that. Um, he God worked in him in that way in order to save our marriage, and in order to help me see that I really am loved,
mm-hmm,
and that he can learn to love me, you know.
beautiful.
So it was really two people who modeled that for me.
So, Kendra and Joe.
Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Joe? Who's that one person for you?
I was trying to rack my brain thinking about it, and it was sort of interesting because I don't think I've ever stopped to think about it because there's no one that immediately jumps to mind,
Mm-hmm,
um, other than the Lord Himself. I mean, really, in my darkest days, the only one there for me was the Lord in the
mm-hmm.
darkness. Um, but in
And
reflecting back on my life, there's been a couple men. Interestingly enough, when I was young as an altar boy, there was a priest there, Father Schultz, really touched me as a very kind, warm, and generous person. I had not known that from a man previously, and
mm-hmm,
got that sense from him. And then apart from Father Schultz would be my second uncle, um, Uncle Ralph. He was just a good-hearted, sweet, kind, very attentive, which was different, from the men in the immediate circle of my life. But
yeah,
yeah, so those two really showed me something different as a man.
yeah. Well, God bless Kendra. God bless Joe. God bless Father Schultz. I said it right, right?
Yes.
And God bless Uncle Ralph. So we always want to give them their shout outs because, again, we don't realize how shining our lights could be so impactful in someone's lives. And you
Yeah.
guys are doing a super service because people are coming to you and probably not realizing that what's really lacking in their lives is spiritual. It's deeper
Yes,
than
that's
just
right.
the physical relationship. And even though you might not ever mention Jesus's name, excuse me, you're pouring into them something that, or planting seeds in their hearts that God can cultivate. And who knows, maybe I'll interview one of them one day and they'll be like, who is the one person? And they'll be like, can I give you two? It was
Holly and
Holly
Joe.
and Joe. And they'll be like, I know them. I know Holly and Joe. Yeah. Yeah. That would be a blessing for me. But I do want to thank you both for giving me this time and sharing with me and sharing with the listeners and viewers. And like I said, when we prayed before we started, my prayer was that something was said that will encourage the hearts of everyone who tunes in. And I know there's plenty that we've discussed today that will be a blessing to them. So I just want to thank you again for sharing your gifts with us tonight. And I pray that God continues to richly bless your union as you continue to help others with theirs.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Columbus.
All right. All right. All right, guys. You've seen it. You've heard it. Now it's time to go live it. Let's get busy living the life. Did you know that you could actually support the YouTube channel and podcast? That's right. If you have a desire to be a blessing to the show, there's many different ways you can do it. We have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and you can use the website to make a donation. Any donation will help, and every donation will be used to pour into the lives of others. So if you want to click on the description of this video, you can find all of the information you need to make a donation. God bless you, and thank you for your support.